Everything you say, I'm just going to say like that's good. Good point. Awesome. Yep. I need a positive echo. Yeah, like a positive echo. I got invited to this thing a year ago here. The guy said, "This is what you're doing." I said, I am at I want to meet the best ball. Khaki shorts and button-down shirt. Look, I went walking on the golf ball at my clothes. I really had to blow all of my clothes. I had to do a mental checklist. Things to bring to the ball. I was like, golf ball, gloves. I don't have gloves, so that's where we get formal.
Ready? Ready? Welcome, everyone. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the July 12th meeting of the Brentwood Rotary Club. For those of you that are our guests today, I am your honored president, Sarah Johnson, here in our first official meeting of the 2019-2020 year. We're going to have Mr. Alan Treadway. I'm sure Alan is here. Come forward. He is going to lead us in our invocation. And then Tim Stoll is going to lead us in our four-way test. And then we're going to sit down, and then we're going to talk about the rest of the announcements. All right, go ahead, Mr. Allen.
Bow your heads, please. Dear Lord, being in Rotary allows us to serve others. We ask that you help us remember always the four-way test as we work today and every day. Help us to serve humbly and willingly as we focus on the needs of our community. Thank you for our gifts, and help us to use them wisely. Amen.
Allegiance to the flag of
States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you all so very much for that. And I am going to ask Mr. Keeley Hall, he is making a return appearance for us today, to introduce our guests and visiting Rotarians.
You can't get rid of me. Back by popular demand. We'll say it that way. Back by popular demand. Well, I was going to go introduce Kip Dodson's honored guest, but one of them was about to leave, but now she decided not to for a second. Okay, Kip Dodson, introduce your honored guest.
I am pleased to introduce my 15-year-old son, Drew Dodson, who's a sophomore at Ravenwood High School. Go Raptors. And I'm also proud to introduce my daughter, Devin Dodson, who is a Ravenwood Raptors graduate this year and will be attending Texas A&M University starting August 14th on a U.S. Air Force ROTC full ride scholarship.
And a member of the Corps of Cadets, right? Yes, that's awesome. Awesome. All right, and keeping with the theme, Jennifer Shepard will introduce her honored guest.
Kip and I did not communicate that it was Bring Your Kid to Rotary Day, but it worked out great. This is my son, Stephen Shepard. He is 16 today. It's his birthday. So when we, yes, as soon as we leave here, we're going to the DMV to get his driver's license. But he is a rising junior at Ravenwood, and he is a really hilarious person, and he loves jokes. So if you've got a good joke, come see him afterwards.
Clean jokes, please.
Oh, wait, that's okay. Bruce. Bruce Arnheimer is here. Did I get you right after you took a bite, Bruce? Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll just say welcome, Bruce. We all remember him. He's a member of the Brentwood Morning Club. But we're just going to call you an honorary member here. You're here as often as you're there. And then another very special guest today. Welcome back, everybody, Bob Fink! Hey! Thank you for being here today. Hey, do you want to give us an update? Just tell us how you're doing. All right. Do you want to do a calculation of some chemistry equation or something? Rocket science. I don't know. That was for you, our visitors watching from home. How you doing? All right, that's it. Sarah, back to you.
Thanks, Keeley. And we have the wonderful Miss Julie Boone that's going to do our happy buck today. So who's happy, everybody?
One. I am happy. It's Friday. It's been a very long week. Who's happy? All right.
My 16-year-old grandson soloed an airplane on July the 2nd. He was 15, he became 16, and did an outstanding job. And you should have seen the pretty little girl that was his instructor. She had graduated from MTSU and just did a wonderful job of teaching him how to fly. So we got another one in the family. My daughter's a pilot, my son-in-law's a pilot, I'm a pilot, and now Braden's a pilot.
Awesome. All right, who else is happy?
A couple clients are happy with the case settled, and another one just got out of a case. So I'm happy too.
I have a happy buck, too.
Well, there have been a couple of 15-year-olds who mentioned today. Today is my birthday. Unfortunately, I'm a little older than 15. But I thank all of you for your friendship and the opportunity to work with you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
I have a happy buck today. A lot of you got to meet my 8-year-old nephew at the installation banquet. After the banquet, he came back to my house for the next 2 weeks off and on, and I am putting this dollar in for every Rotarian in here that is a parent and who has been a parent, because I'm just going to let you know that was more work than my day job. And I will tell you, I love him dearly. So this is for all of you, and thank you for being parents. It's true.
This is not a happy bucks. This is a collect the bucks. For the meeting next week, I'm trying to bring in all the money, my accounts receivable for the golf tournament. I think I've contacted everyone, but I still have 12 sponsorships not paid for. So if you're one of those illustrious members on my 12 list, try to get that to me this week so I can give a good report next week. Thank you.
All right, who else?
Hey.
Anybody? Alan? All right.
Thanks, Julie. Oh, Alan changed his mind.
$50 days. 50 days till college football season starts. Okay? And I'm not picking Ole Miss to win the West, but I'm not picking Alabama. I'm going with
Texas A&M.
go.
Wow. Make sure nobody bets Alan or get his money up front. Just saying. All right, thank you, Julie. A couple of few announcements. If everyone could please keep in their thoughts and prayers John Stokes and John Miles and Beth Dormney, who John Miles and Beth are here today, yay, as they recover from some health issues and some medical needs. We'd appreciate that. I want to also remind everybody to dream big this year. We are looking for ideas from the club in terms of what we can do for our community, a large project similar to the Granny White Pavilion, things of that nature. Now, these projects are not going to be whatever the club decides. It's not going to happen this year, but it's planning for this year and future years to do something to truly give back. Some examples that have been submitted already are to discuss possibly looking at doing an inclusion park somewhere in Brentwood or the surrounding area for special needs kids and families to play together. There were some suggestions after the installation banquet to start an exploration of possibly a building facility for our club at some point. Things like that. Things that are going to take many years in planning. So I'm asking the club that if you have ideas and suggestions to please submit them to Hunter McCarthy and his committee, which is the Community Services Committee. And that way they can start having that exploration from the club level. And we're asking you to get it to him by August 15th. So just kind of keep that in mind. You'll hear some more about that as time goes on. I'm also asking this year that all committee chairs, even if it's Harpeth River, Pancake Day, subcommittees, whatever it is, I'm asking all committee chairs to call a meeting in July and August, one of the two, whatever's best for the schedules. And the reason is there's a lot of club members who don't even know they're serving on a committee. They don't know what the committee does because the committee has just run like clockwork for so long. So I'm asking that every committee meet at some point over the next, let's call it 60 days. So there'll be more to come about that. If you're a committee chair or considering becoming a committee chair, we are going to have an orientation for committee chairs. So what does a committee chair do? What does the board expect? Those kinds of things. That's going to be on August 5th. So you'll be getting some more information about that as well. And Susie Lindsay has graciously agreed to lead that orientation for us. Yes, sir.
Just a question, just to remind everybody, if you look at your reflections that you get every week, if you go all the way to the bottom of that reflections, it will list your committee and what your role is in that committee, whether you're a member or a chair. So it's out
That's
there
great.
so you can look at it.
Thank you, Tom. I had forgotten to mention that. I appreciate that. So everybody, check your reflections. They came out yesterday. Also, as club members, I want your input. I know some people are saying, oh, you don't want to hear from me. I want to hear from you. I would love for this club to think about what we do and see how we can enhance it. And I'm going to give you an example for what I mean. I was speaking with Lennis today, and we were talking about the AV that he so graciously does for us every week. If you've got things that you think should go on the AV that the club needs to know about, please contact Lennis. Please help him with some of that content. Things like that would make our programs every week a little more dynamic for the club members. That's what we're looking for. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roger Greenup to introduce our speaker for today. Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon. It's an honor for me to introduce Jim Bonds, a longtime friend. Some of you, a few of you who've been around a while will recognize Jim. Jim and his family have called Williamson County home for 37 years. His wife, Nancy, was a teacher in the Williamson County schools system, and they have 3 adult children who live in the Williamson County area and graduated from Brentwood High School. And although Jim retired a couple of years ago after 14 years in healthcare sales, it was his broadcasting career that brought him to Nashville. He was sports director at Channel 2 and later part-time anchor at Channel 4. His accomplishments include Best Sportscast Tennessee and Alabama Sportscaster of the Year. His primetime special, Kings of the Court, about the Kansas City Kings, won a local Emmy. Jim covered 2 Super Bowls, a World Series, did a Big Ten Conference Game of the Week. He also hosted coaches shows at the University of Kansas and Vanderbilt, and also did play-by-play for both schools. After 4 years, he hosted Southern Football Saturday with Coach Doug Matthews and Bill King. Jim is also an avid LA Dodgers fan and an Ole Miss fan. Please join me in welcoming Jim Bonds.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Up, 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 up. Am I up? On? I can use this one until you get it. I have really put Lennis through the paces today. We had a flash drive that just refused to work. We got it early and we got Plan B working. So thanks to Lennis. You guys don't know what he goes through to get everything ready here, unless you're here at 10:30 in the morning. He does a wonderful job. Am I working now? Okay. Well, thank you, and appreciate the service you guys provide for Brentwood. You are a service organization, and we can count on our officials in Washington and other downtown Nashville. But in my opinion, the folks who make Brentwood and other cities perk and make it what it is today are our local service organizations such as the Rotary Club. I'm not patronizing you, but it's just the fact. So we appreciate that. I see a lot of familiar faces around here. Larry and Roger and so many of you and Hottie Toddy over here, John Miles and the rest of you guys. But some of us, now this sounds like your father or your grandfather, or according to your age group, of course, this is the old going to school uphill in the snow both ways. But some of us can remember when there was no Concord Road exit, right? Some of us can remember when the churches had to dismiss on a staggered basis so that we could get to Noble's Restaurant or Shoney's or Captain D's or Ponderosa, because those were our choices back in 1980 something. Now the youngsters over here, they're shaking their heads. I don't believe that because, well, that was just like I don't believe we lived in a world without internet. But true story. Hey, in the next 25 minutes or so, we want to tell you what Reboot is all about. Tell you maybe how it differs from other veterans presentations you've heard about, and maybe what you can do if you so choose to do that. My wife and I went to on a European vacation about 5 years ago. Part of the trip, we made a stop in Normandy. And if you stand and look over Omaha Beach and you aren't impacted, I don't mean just a little bit, but if you don't come home with something deep inside you, you need to make a visit to one of our many qualified and talented cardiologists around here. It will leave an impression on you. And we did. I did. A few months later, after returning from that trip and visiting Normandy, we're sitting in our church, and there was this group that came by and made a presentation. This is about 4 years ago. And we heard about an occupational therapist, which was, she was
obviously working up at Fort Campbell with the veterans. And she sensed that even though she was doing everything she could to help the veterans, there was something missing. So she started having some groups come to her home. And she started working with them on something that wasn't being done at Fort Campbell. And it turned into what eventually became Reboot. And that was the beginning of an amazing success story. That was 2011 when she started working. Here we are in 2019. Let's take you about through the steps of what's happened since 2011 to today. Let's go ahead, Linus, and we'll start here. First of all, the issue, the problems, as you've probably heard many times before, societal issues. 44% of our veterans have difficulty transitioning to civilian life. I think you would agree with that. You can't just take someone off the battlefield that's been trained to do X, Y, and Z and come back home to the tranquil lifestyle without there being some transition issues, right? The suicide rate, the divorce rate, medication abuse, all higher among our veterans. Okay. So what is Reboot? If you look, can you guys see over here? The definition obviously is a 12-week course for faith-based combat trauma healing course. Reboot addresses the spiritual and moral wounds of war, helping service members and their families, and that's very important, the service members and their families rebuild character, community, and leadership. I think it's pretty consistent with what you guys are all about, right? We rebuild the community step by step, in this case, veteran by veteran. So that's the definition, a faith-based course. Without being preachy, if you go to our courses, and by the way, Brentwood Baptist, which is the church that Roger and Larry, many of us attend, if you go to our course, you'll never hear the words Brentwood Baptist. You'll never do that. Go ahead. So how do we do it? 5 steps, 5 keys. Christian concepts to reframe adversity. The opportunity to grow rather than be in distress. There's a lot of sports analogies you can make there. We go in business and every walk of life, there's opportunities to take on our adversity and turn it around. Look at it from a positive lens, if you will. It cultivates trust. Every leader in our course are veterans. I'm not a veteran, so I would not teach the course. The people they see, our veterans see it leading the course, they have to know they've been through. They have walked that mile with them, ahead of them, so they have that camaraderie there. And 3, the combat trauma affects the entire family. So Reboot makes it open to spouses, children, and loved ones of service members and veterans. And there's another component there. Each of our classes, and by the way, beginning next month will be our 7th course that we have been involved with at Brentwood Baptist. We bring meals for all the veterans so that we remove every obstacle that we could possibly think of. And many of these meals, most of them, quite frankly, are provided by life groups or Sunday school classes, whatever we call them. And it's more than just the food, more than just being there and eating so they don't have an obstacle. It's the showing of camaraderie, being there shoulder by shoulder, ask, how are you doing? Just building relationships with the veterans. That means a lot to these guys. Okay. 4, it encourages Christian fellowship, supporting relationships among the participants who share those similar experiences. I can tell you in sitting through one of these 12-week courses, the first week, it's kind of tight-knit. They're not going to say much. Second week, you'll see a little breakthrough. But as these veterans go through the course, they hear week by week what the leader has to say, begin to open up. I'm peeling the onion, to use that cliche, if you will. And then they start to share with one another. And they realize then that they're not the only ones going through the trauma that they suffered. And all trauma isn't combat trauma. It can be other forms of trauma. And that's why Reboot has extended its services, its courses, to not just those who have served overseas, but to first responders, policemen, firemen, and others. And 5, it offers volunteer opportunities for graduates to serve others dealing with combat trauma. And the numbers we'll show you in just a minute. Many of the graduates of Reboot come back to become leaders of future classes. Okay. So, and some of the 12-week courses, these are the subject matters taught in these. Stop the bleeding, the cost of forgiveness, depression and suicide. It hits it straight ahead, doesn't dodge it at all. and going through the valley, basically moving forward, leaving it behind. So 250 reboot group locations is what it's grown to. Amazing. That includes Australia and Germany. Okay?
South Korea, Ukraine.
Okay. And the Ukraine? Wow. Amazing. What started as Dr. Jenny Owens meeting with folks in her home has grown now to 250 locations. By the numbers, I know some of you are only impressed with numbers. Here they are. 81% graduation rate of those who come to the class. 85% of the graduates return for future courses. Does that mean they didn't get it the first time? Not necessarily. It means they want to come back, hear it again. It may mean they got it, but they just want to come back and get more because they need it. 41% of the grads trained to become course leaders. I think that's an outstanding number. They want to come back and share it with other veterans because they realize the impact it had on them. That's a great testimonial. And 95% highly recommend the reboot course. Those are the numbers. I thought it would be effective, if we may, to hear testimonials from actual veterans. So this is only 3 minutes. Give a listen, see what you think.
I'll hold the mic up.
You can tell that, like he said, they legitimately care. They want to help. There is hope. And seeing him change, I knew that that's what we had to be involved with. Is something that was gonna, if it can help him, there's many out there that need it. It can help them too.
I believe with somebody with PTSD or TBI, you're never out of recovery. A lot of people use that as an excuse not to flourish.
The biggest change that I've seen in my life since my involvement with Reboot is just the repetitive examples of God's power in people's lives.
My husband went through surgery and then got addicted to the pain pill. And when he finally told me, he had 22 minutes before he had to leave the house to go away for 28 days.
It was the most challenging places for my faith downrange in Afghanistan. Everything was challenged and I had a hard time dealing with it, and I didn't know how to deal with it when I came back.
I was going through a divorce, and my life was just chaotic.
He decided he didn't want to be married anymore, and so I was gone for about 3 months, and then I came back so that we could raise our child together.
I came back from deployment and just wanted to be alone.
I thought it was going to be a Bible study. That's what I was anticipating, but turned out to be a whole lot more.
When I first walked into Reboot, I thought I was walking into just another stupid program. But what I developed was a community of brothers and sisters that I've actually been able to develop a brotherhood with.
But after being in Reboot, I realized that it was a blessing, was the help that I needed.
I saw it as an opportunity for individual help and assistance. I figured that the things I was trying and the things I was doing was not working at all. And coming into it, I was assuming that this is just going to be for me. When I got there, a couple weeks in, I realized it's not about me. It's about the guys around me, to my left and to my right. How can we do this together? Encouraging.
A brotherhood.
Hope. Healing. Awesome.
Eye-opening.
Healing.
Life-changing.
Showing up there and seeing a bunch of people who were just like me.
What I trained myself to believe was that I'm the only one. And I'm the only one fighting this fight. I'm the only one dealing with all this. And so to come back to Reboot that second, third, fourth, and fifth week, it was just like, wow, I'm not alone. I don't have to do this by myself. There's guys that have experienced what I've experienced, we can all lean on each other and go from there.
Thank you. The fact is, from that first time we walked up to the service, the graduation service up at Fort Campbell, we heard the wife of a soldier, a veteran who was ready to file for divorce. We heard from a soldier, a veteran who was ready to commit suicide before going to the course. And we knew then that we wanted to get involved in good Southern Baptist tradition. We had to come back and form a committee, but eventually we got our courses started, and we're so glad we did. Sitting in those courses, we've heard some amazing stories. And that's just an example of comments you hear from these guys. We've had students, course members, attendees, whatever you want to call them, veterans, all the way back to Vietnam. Vietnam veterans who have carried this burden of trauma with them all the way since 1969. It is amazing. And this course works, and we owe it to them. Hey, we're lucky today because you don't have just me. And by the way, these are some of the things you can do. You may know someone, if you can refer to someone, or there may be someone in this room, as there usually is, that may need a reboot course themselves. But the main thing you can do, and the reason we're here today, we're not asking for money. We're asking you to make the community aware, someone that you know, to make them aware that reboot is available, and it works. That's what we're here for today. But we have someone here that I want you to we have a few minutes, and I want you to pepper him with questions because we mentioned Dr. Jenny Owens. Her husband, Evan Owens, is the executive director of Reboot, and he's been instrumental in its growth. Evan, come up here and let these people ask you a few questions. Evan Owens, everyone.
Yeah, so I'll just share one thing and then we'll get to the questions. It's neat, I don't watch those videos very much anymore just because, you don't watch videos that you were part of. But, every one of those people up there, men and women, they have an incredible story. And there's one of them I hadn't seen in a while, and I forgot he was kind of the older gentleman who said, downrange was in the toughest places for me. And his story is actually incredible. I'll just share this one little thought. He got back and he was actually doing quite well. And some of you guys might remember there was a mass shooting incident at Fort Hood down in Texas about a decade ago. Well, the way that happened was there was a higher enlisted person who had to escort 5 or 6 people to a clinic. Upon walking in that clinic, there was someone who was disgruntled at the person behind the counter, but they were sitting in the waiting room. They left, and when they came back, that's when they began a shooting spree. Well, what's amazing is his story is actually he brought the 4 guys in who ultimately all were killed to the clinic. And he was sitting in the clinic when the shooter began firing. And he was one of the only people in the clinic who survived that day. And so you think about carrying that. And what's funny is he didn't even talk about it with his family for 4 years. They asked how if he was impacted. He said he was buildings away, when in fact he was in the main room. And what it turned out, the security footage is actually what outed him. Is he was on the security footage doing some pretty heroic things. You can actually find some of that online if you ever want to look up the security footage. It's pretty incredible. So that's us in a nutshell, Jim. Thank you. Jim's only paid $100,000 a day to share these incredible stories about Reboot, which is good. The check's been in the mail for a few years, though. It's been lost, to him. So I'll open up any questions. I know there are a million veteran programs out there, but we also have launched a separate program, Reboot First Responders, that is launching here in Williamson County actually in September. We've got a group in Nashville already that's got about 20 first responders going through it and seeing incredible things. So if you have opportunities to work with law enforcement, first responders, EMS, fire service, whatever it may be, that'd be another thing I'd love to speak with you about. So questions, you may or may not have any. What questions might you have? Yes, sir. So it's at no cost to participants. Yep, participants never pay anything. Yep. Yes, sir. Yeah, so neat. Actually, Operation Standout's been a partner of Reboot since 2010. Actually, one of the photos up there was us standing at Operation Standout, actually, which was neat. And they use our curriculum as part of their overall umbrella. They don't really speak to the issue of trauma directly. They're more focused on homelessness, addiction, and job placement is their primary focus. And traditionally, they're going to work with veterans who are who have what they call comorbidity, who have a series of other issues going on that complicate beyond just military service and trauma. And then uniquely because of our course, the bulk of the people we serve have combat experience, and that's not necessarily true for Operation Stand Down. But great program, good friends of ours. John's a really close friend of mine. We hang out all the time. What else? Yes. Yes, so they meet one night per week, every week for 12 weeks. Meals and childcare are included in each course meeting. It's about 2 hours long. Sometimes they go a little bit longer if somebody's really getting into something. And about the first 45 minutes to an hour is really community building. If you look at any mental health spectrum, the number one indicator of long-term mental health is actually participation in authentic, loving community and trusting relationships. So we really put an emphasis on reconnecting people with one another. And the second half of the class really is instruction, facilitation of a guided course. It's not a support group. It's not like AA. I mean, it's an actual course. People take notes and they have workbooks, and then they're taking that home and digesting, dissecting, discussing. I don't know any other D words, but that's the little alliteration for you today. What else? Yes.
I was talking about the lady on the video that talked about how her husband came home and left divorce.
Yeah, Cherie. Yeah.
Somewhere that I read, first time I've been given a mic. I read somewhere that most people that are in active combat, when they come back, it's very hard assimilating back into the family.
Right.
There's like a 90-something% divorce rate of combat veterans going overseas. Something astronomical.
Right.
Through your courses and helping to deal with that trauma, is there a component of like a mixers or anything for the members and their families for people going through similar things to help them deal with what trauma these classes are bringing up for those veterans?
Well, so the course itself actually addresses how to actually heal and what healing will look like. So, for example, if we go through a devastating experience, all of us are going to be changed. So the idea of I want to get back to my old self isn't really a reality, right? Because we're all constantly changing. And so the course really says, how do you cope with what you've experienced? How do you let it become something that grows you as opposed to something that destroys you? And by doing that in a family structure, one of the big mistakes I think that's been made is treating family units as separate individuals. So we've got a program for the kids, a program for the spouses. But if you subscribe to my belief system that when two are married, they became one, well, then you have to believe that trauma impacts the whole unit, even if only one member experiences that. And I could share 3 hours of stories about that. But the biggest thing that we give them is shared language and shared experience and structure to have difficult conversations. So we make, in a marriage or relationships, even relationship with kids, we make difficult conversations less difficult because now there's a flow of how to talk about that subject, and there's also common language, and there's a process that now we can collectively work through to be able to heal together as opposed to things. And Reboot, because it's I think there's a lot of the soul that we've tapped into, the spirit that we've tapped into is I believe this. There are a lot of people who are tired of waiting on the cavalry of government aid to solve this problem of suicide crisis in veterans. I think they're sick and tired of playing in golf tournaments and running 5Ks and just sending money someplace else, hoping that the big institution fixes. They actually want to be part of the solution. And Reboot equips everyday people, just like all of us in this room, to actually tangibly be part of the solution. And that's a really unique thing in this space. There's not really another program that does that. And a lot of times what we find is by including the spouses, they bring so much to the table in terms of their giftings that a lot of times they're almost ignored. Like, well, we're just here for the vets, and you just kind of hang on for the ride and stick around and be faithful. And, it's not 1920s anymore. Tammy Wynette's "Stand by Your Man" isn't necessarily true in modern kind of marriages. That was a good Tammy Wynette reference, by the way. You guys, Tammy Wynette, anybody know? Other questions?
Evan, talk about the impact on children. We know that the psychological impact is great. Now it's older down, getting empirical evidence studies.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is trauma actually by trying to think how to make this not super geeky. It actually does change. This is pretty shocking. Quick little neat little factoid for you. When you experience a really traumatic event, actually part of your DNA, part of your genetic code is actually altered, which is pretty crazy. And what's incredible is science has now proven that alteration actually is passed down to your children, which is pretty unbelievable. The same is true with addictions. It's not just alcohol addiction, pornography addiction, relationship, cheating, affairs, that kind of stuff. All of that is actually passed down to your kids. And so a lot of times what we find is that these kids are actually displaying symptoms associated with traumas that they never personally experienced, which is pretty crazy. And so by addressing the whole family, we're able to help heal that. And we've seen decreases across the board in basically all populations we serve. Lower anxiety, lower depression, better sleep, lower fatigue, better engagement in social and family roles, a bunch of other medical outcomes. We work with Duke and University of Illinois for all of our outcomes assessment stuff, and they've been University of Illinois. I can't say enough good about. They're really really helpful. So I'll just say this. Not everybody was called to fight in the war. Only actually technically 0.4% of the eligible American population served in this war. So people talk about World War II. 22% served in a 4.5-5 year war, versus this war is 20 years long, right? Longest war in U.S. history, and only less than 0.5% served in this war. And so if you did, thank you. If you served at all, thank you. But since not all of us are called to fight, my challenge to you is I think all of us are called to serve. And I think that's what you guys can do, is find a way to serve. And so talk to me afterwards. Talk to Lori from my team. Talk to Jim. Wave your hand, Lori. That's Lori. We want to find ways to get you to join us, whether that's just spreading the word or equipping you with some encouragement cards for you and your kids to write to participants. Lots of things you can do. And we've got business cards and nothing but time. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim and Evan, for speaking with us today. And I just love how that what you said about the 41% of those that go through the program come back and become teachers, and they pay it forward. I just think that's fantastic. If you wouldn't mind, we have a book that we read to first graders in the Williamson County Schools that we would ask that both of you sign. And when we read, we're going to talk about your organization and what you do to help veterans. And thank you for all that you guys do. And we also have a couple of pens for you guys to accept as a small token of our appreciation. So we thank you. And I want to ask the club to please remember Beth and John Miles and John Stokes as you go through the week. And I'm going to also ask that as we close our meeting, thank you all first and foremost for being here. And I'd ask that we make sure that we remember to practice the 4-way test as we go through our week. And with that, I hadn't gotten that yet. I've got my... Come on now. You're on the script. I was just getting it to tease you. Come on now. And if you could remember to please help Larry put the tables up after we're finished, we would greatly appreciate it. And with that, Mr. Larry Kane, we're adjourned.
Is that as fun as it makes? I've always wanted to try it.